The Green family home looked perfect from the outside, but inside it was a cauldron of tension ready to explode. Michael, the head of the family, was a man of iron discipline and steadfast principles. He loved order, economy, and control over everything. He started every morning with a newspaper, a cup of black coffee, and checking the family budget. He could find a reason for irritation even in the smallest trifle. This morning, his eyes landed on Alex, who was sitting at the table with the phone in his hands. Michael was annoyed by literally everything. How his son was sitting, how he was holding the fork, how the images on the smartphone screen were changing quickly. Is poking your finger at the phone all day. Is this your new future? Michael said sharply, banging his cup loudly on the table. Kelly, who was standing by the stove, tried to intervene to relieve the tension. Michael, leave him. He's already worried about the interview. But Michael did not relent. Is he worried? He mockingly raised an eyebrow. If he was so worried, he would have found a job a long time ago. At the age of 23, he still lives in our house. And who, I wonder, pays for the electricity that he endlessly consumes? Alex tried to hold back, but his patience also had its limits. Dad, I'm not just sitting around. I'm looking for a job. I'm working on my resume. He tried to justify himself. Work? Ha! You'd better turn off the light when you leave the room. It would have cost me less, Michael snapped. It was a typical morning at the greenhouse, with Michael constantly reminding him of his rules, which covered everything from water usage to how long the TV was on. He even controlled how much food was put on the plates. Kelly tried to change the subject, but it didn't work. Alex, annoyed to the brim, silently got up from the table and went to his room. He closed the door and leaned back against it, breathing deeply. This house no longer felt like his home. Inside the room, Alex began to gather his things. A backpack, a suitcase, a few favorite books. His room was his refuge, but even here he could no longer feel at ease. Kelly walked in quietly when she saw him packing. Her heart was torn between her son and her husband, but she knew Alex had to go. She touched his shoulder, and her warm touch was the only support he needed. In the evening, when Alex was already standing at the door, Michael only gave a cold look. Well, I finally got it together. Let's see how long you can last without our money, he said with a bitter smile. Kelly hugged her son and whispered good luck. Alex didn't answer his father, just took one last look at the house that was no longer his home. When the door to his home closed behind Alex, he felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. A new life awaited him, and it scared and inspired him at the same time. In his hands, he held a suitcase with the most necessary things and the keys to the apartment that his grandmother had left for him. The apartment was small, located in an old building near the city center. Grandma always called it the corner of peace. She often said that this place was her refuge from the hustle and bustle. Alex had been here more than once as a child, playing on the mosaic parquet floor or listening to his grandmother's stories about her youth. His path lay through the night streets, illuminated only by the dim light of lanterns. The suitcase rumbled dully on the pavement, and the cold air carried the smell of dampness. Alex walked forward, remembering the day when his grandmother handed him the keys to the apartment with the words, "Someday this place will be yours. It will always be waiting for you." When he approached the old building, his heart fluttered. Traces of time were visible on the facade, peeling paint, cracks on the walls. But even that seemed comfortable to Alex now. He climbed the wooden stairs, which creaked softly under his weight. The key was inserted into the keyhole, turned with a little effort, and the door opened. The apartment was dark and cool. Alex flicked the switch, and the lamp under the ceiling flickered before lighting up with a dim, warm light. Everything looked as if time had stopped here. An old sofa with faded upholstery, a bookshelf filled with his grandmother's novels, and a kitchen table with a scratched surface all reminded him of her. Alex put his suitcase by the door and walked across the room. He stopped at a window that looked out onto the street. Here there was neither the oppressive presence of the father, nor the reproaches that sounded every day. There was silence here. "I'll be fine, Grandma," he said quietly to himself, though there was uncertainty in his voice. He decided to leave the unpacking for tomorrow. Alex lay down on the sofa, covering himself with an old blanket that smelled of mothballs and memories. A few days have passed since Alex started his new life in his grandmother's apartment. He quickly found a job in a small event organization company. It was his first real job, and although it wasn't paying much yet, Alex felt proud of himself. At work, he met John, an experienced colleague who was about 43 years old. John had been with the company for many years, and he and Alex quickly found a common language. John often shared his stories, sometimes a little humorous and sometimes sad. One day, during his lunch break, John sighed and admitted to Alex that he had recently gone through a difficult divorce. His wife decided to leave him, leaving John homeless. He was currently living in a cheap motel and was looking for a place to stay. Alex, listening to this story, began to consider the possibility of helping. His grandmother's apartment had 2 rooms, and most of the time one of them was empty. He himself is not quite used to living independently yet, and he would not mind a little extra income. "Look, John," Alex said, choosing his words carefully. "I've got a spare room. It is simple, but cozy. If you want, you can live there until you find something else." John looked surprised and a little moved. "Seriously?" he asked. "I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," Alex smiled. "I still need additional income and you need a place to live. It is beneficial for both." John smiled thoughtfully and shook Alex's hand. "Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate it." The next day, John began moving his things into the apartment. He was practical and neat, so he quickly arranged the room so that it looked cozy. Cohabitation began calmly. John often joked that they were now a team and even shared his experiences of adulthood, giving Alex useful advice. Alex was worried at first if they would be able to get along, but John turned out to be friendly and responsible. They even started spending evenings together, discussing life, work, and plans for the future. One day, Alex decided to visit his parents. It was the first visit home since his departure. Kelly opened the door. Her face lit up with joy when she saw her son. She hugged him and immediately invited him to the kitchen, where the table was already set. "What a pleasant surprise. We were already getting worried," she said as she poured him some tea. Michael was sitting in his usual place with a newspaper, but this time he immediately put it down when he saw Alex. "Well, how is your independent life?" he asked. But this time there was no irony in his voice, just genuine curiosity. Alex sat down at the table and began to tell. He talked about his work, how he got into the company, and how important it was for him to take this first step. Kelly listened intently, and Michael nodded from time to time, though he tried to hide his pleasure. Then Alex went to the main thing. "By the way, I now have a roommate." Michael raised his eyebrows slightly, but said nothing, letting his son continue. "One of my colleagues at work, John, is recently divorced and homeless. I thought it would be wise to rent one of the rooms to him, so he has a place to live and I have additional income." Michael thought for a moment, then smiled. "Well, it already sounds reasonable. It seems you are starting to think with your head." Kelly smiled as she looked at her husband. "I told you Alex would be fine," she said softly, lightly touching Michael's hand. The next morning, Michael woke up in his usual mood, stern and critical. His thoughts were focused on Alex's visit yesterday, doubts swirling in his head. Who is this colleague, John? Can he be trusted? And is Alex really up to the task? At breakfast, as Kelly poured the coffee, Michael pushed the newspaper away and looked at her with a displeased expression. "You know," he began, "you should go to Alex and check everything." Kelly placed the cup in front of him and sat down at the table. "What do you mean?" "You should check who he brought to live in his grandmother's apartment. We know nothing about this, John, and also—" He paused, frowning. "I doubt that there is order." Kelly sighed. "Michael, you're starting again. Alex is already an adult. He makes his own decisions." "An adult?" interrupted Michael with sarcasm. "He barely started working, and now he decided to share an apartment with a stranger. Do you know how it could end? Maybe that man is some kind of troublemaker, or worse." Kelly looked up, trying to stay calm, but Michael was already winded. "You will go to him today. Look what's happening there. And you will not just talk to Alex, but check everything. What is the condition of the apartment? Is that John normal? Is there order? Michael, are you serious? It looks like you want to control his life." "It's not a control, it's a check," Michael snapped, banging his spoon on the table. "We cannot just sit and believe that everything is fine." Kelly didn't argue. She knew that when Michael was in this mood, it was best to agree and do as he asked. "Okay, I'll go," she said, getting up from the table. Michael just nodded, but there was the same stern look in his eyes that always made everyone around him obey his decision. Later that day, Kelly headed to Alex's apartment feeling a little nervous. She knew that her arrival might seem intrusive to her son, but she also understood that it would calm Michael a little. Kelly reached Alex's grandmother's apartment in the middle of the afternoon. My heart was worried. Knocking on the door, Kelly expected to see Alex, but a strange man answered the door. "You must be Kelly?" he asked, a little surprised. His voice was low and calm, and his eyes radiated a warm friendliness. "Yeah, I'm Alex's mom," Kelly answered, a little confused. "John," he introduced himself, holding out his hand. "Alex is at work now, but come in, don't stand here in the corridor." Kelly hesitated for just a moment before taking a step forward. John invited her into the living room and motioned for her to sit down. The apartment looked well kept. The kitchen was sparkling clean, there was a slight aroma of coffee in the air, and everything was in its place. You're very cozy in here, Kelly remarked, glancing around the room. We're trying, John replied with a slight smile. Alex keeps everything in order, although I also make an effort. He has good taste in order. John offered her tea, and she accepted. As he placed the cup in front of her, Kelly noticed how confident and effortless he moved. Everything about him radiated calmness and maturity. Alex said you two work together. Kelly began to open up the conversation. Yes, we know each other from work, John answered. He is a wonderful guy, young, but already thinks like an adult. You have every reason to be proud of him. Kelly felt a warmth in her soul at those words. She was always pleased to hear her son's praise. The conversation continued, and there was a strange ease between them. John talked a little about his life, how he survived a difficult divorce, how he became homeless and started everything from scratch. Kelly was touched by his frankness. She couldn't remember the last time she had been so open with someone. You give the impression of someone who doesn't give up, she said, looking into his eyes. John smiled, and there was something warm and almost shy about that smile. You can't do otherwise. Life sometimes throws us challenges, but that's no reason to give up. Their eyes met, and a soft silence fell between them. Kelly felt her heart race. She was surprised by how easy and pleasant it was for her to be around this man. I'm sorry if I distracted you, John finally said, leaning forward slightly. No, what are you? She answered, her voice shaking. I was very pleased to talk with you. As Kelly was about to leave, John walked her to the door. I hope you're now convinced that Alex is in good hands, he said with the same slight smile she was already beginning to like. Convinced, she answered, turning to him. Thank you, John. You are a great neighbor for my son, and you're a wonderful mother, he said quietly, and their eyes met again. There was more than mere politeness between them in that moment. It was a feeling of deep sympathy that both tried to hide. When Kelly got home, her thoughts were on John. She could not understand why this meeting left such a strong mark on her soul. After that meeting with John, Kelly couldn't stop thinking about him. His warm look, sincerity, and calm attitude to life left a mark in her heart. Although she thought it was wrong, something drew her to this man. Soon, John called her himself, thanking her for the visit and asking how she was doing. Their phone conversation, which began with polite phrases, quickly turned into a warm and relaxed conversation. They talked about life, work, shared experiences, and even dreams. John was an attentive listener and seemed to understand her better than anyone else. He could feel Kelly holding something back and subtly nudged her to open up. Communication between them became more and more frequent. They began to meet. First casual walks, coffee in quiet cafes, then longer evenings together. Kelly felt guilty. She knew she had to be devoted to her family, even if her marriage to Michael had long since become routine and cold. One warm evening, Kelly and John were spending time together in his favorite place, a small park on the outskirts of town. The sun was already leaning towards the horizon, coloring the sky in golden-pink shades. She arrived earlier than agreed, and noticing him in the distance, suddenly felt her heart start to beat faster. John was standing by a wooden bench holding coffee in paper cups. Seeing Kelly, he smiled. His gaze was soft and warm. You came early, he said as she moved closer, handing her the coffee. Wanted to stay here a little longer, she replied, looking him straight in the eyes. They sat side by side on a bench, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The conversation started easily, about work, life, but gradually the topics became deeper. Kelly felt her admiration for John grow with each word. At some point, there was silence between them. Not tense, but the one that arises between people who do not need words. The wind gently played with the strands of her hair, and John couldn't look away. You're incredible. You know I am very glad to have met you, he said finally, his voice full of sincerity. John gently reached out, touching her fingers. His touch was warm, confident, and soft at the same time. She looked at him, and he saw excitement and desire in her eyes. Kelly, I know it's not easy, but what's between us, it's not a mistake. We both deserve to be happy. Her heart was beating like it was going to jump out of her chest. She understood that she was taking a step into the unknown, but she could not resist her feelings. I feel the same way, she whispered. John moved closer, his hand touching her face, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was so natural that Kelly couldn't remember the last time she felt anything like it. They were so close that they could feel each other's warmth. Their eyes met, and in that moment, everything around ceased to exist. John leaned into her, and their lips connected in a soft, passionate kiss. Their hands slowly entwined, and Kelly felt as if time had stopped. You have no idea how much you mean to me, John said softly. Me too, John, Kelly replied, looking into his eyes. It was a night that changed everything. Their feelings could no longer remain hidden. This kiss had everything, warmth, tenderness, and passion that flared between two people who had finally felt what true intimacy was. John knew that he couldn't hide the truth from Alex anymore, and decided that it was better to do it himself before Alex found out by accident. One evening, when Alex came home from work and was sitting in the living room, John approached him. "Alex, I want to talk to you." Alex put the phone down and looked at him, noticing that John looked serious. "Did something happen?" "No, but I have something important to tell you." "I don't want you to find out from anyone else," John began as he sat across from him. Alex nodded, waiting to continue. "It concerns your mother. Kelly and we started dating," John said, looking Alex straight in the eye. The room was filled with silence for a moment. John watched Alex's reaction carefully, ready for any emotion: anger, disappointment, surprise. Alex tilted his head to look at John, but his face remained calm. "And how long has it been going on?" he asked calmly. "A few weeks," John answered. "But I want you to know this is serious for me. Kelly is an incredible woman, and I truly love her." Alex smiled. "You know, John, I could say it's strange, but I'm actually happy for you." John breathed a sigh of relief. "Do you really think so?" "Yes, my mom deserves to be happy. I know that she put up with my father and his difficult character all her life. If you can give her what she hasn't had for so long, I'm only happy." John was moved by his words. "Thank you, Alex. It means a lot to me. But you know, if you hurt her, you'll have to deal with me," Alex said with a small smile. But there was seriousness in his words. "I understand that completely," John replied. They exchanged a handshake, John feeling relieved that Alex not only accepted their relationship, but supported it. John called Kelly that evening and told her about the conversation. "He took it very well," said John. "You have a wonderful son, Kelly." Kelly was touched. She knew Alex had always been smart and empathetic, but his support was something she needed more than ever. Kelly had been thinking for days that she couldn't live a lie anymore. She decided to tell Michael the truth about her relationship with John. She knew it would not be easy, but she understood. Honesty is the only way forward. That evening, she was waiting for Michael from work. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it was going to betray her. Kelly set the table, hoping the calm atmosphere would help soften the conversation. When Michael finally walked in the door, he looked tired, as he always did after a hard day. She took a deep breath and gestured for him to sit down. "Michael, I have something important to tell you," she began, trying to keep her composure. He looked at her, and a strange expression appeared in his eyes, a mixture of knowledge and irony. "If you're talking about your lover, I know everything," he said, leaning back in his chair. Kelly froze in place, her eyes widening in surprise. "How do you know?" she whispered, trying to collect her thoughts. Michael smiled, but there was no warmth in his smile. "I have reliable sources." "Did you think I wouldn't notice how you've changed lately?" Kelly felt a wave of shame wash over her. She wanted to explain, to justify herself, but Michael suddenly raised his hand, stopping her. "No need for excuses," he said. "I have already thought about everything." Kelly stared at him, unsure of what to expect. She was sure that accusations and arguments would start now, but what happened next shocked her. Michael took a small box from his pocket and placed it in front of her. "This is for you," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. Kelly hesitantly opened the box. Inside was a thin gold bracelet with an elaborate design. She looked up, not understanding what that meant. "I forgive you everything," Michael said, looking straight into her eyes. "I know that I was not a perfect man. Maybe it's my fault that you found someone else." "Michael," she began, but he stopped her again. "I don't want our marriage to break up, Kelly, and I'm ready to give our marriage a chance. I'm ready to change." Michael's words caught Kelly by surprise. She did not know what to answer. Her feelings for John were genuine, but this unexpected gesture from the man made her think twice. "And one more thing. I decided to find out a little more about this John," Michael continued, his voice steady but his gaze turning cold. "And you know what?" Kelly froze. Her heart beat faster. "I brought the references, Kelly. He has a wife and 3 kids, and they're still not divorced," Michael said, holding her gaze. These words were like a lightning strike. Kelly felt the ground give way from under her feet. "It's not true," she whispered, but there was more doubt than certainty in her voice. "Isn't it true?" Michael asked sarcastically. "I talked to his wife, found her number, and she confirmed everything." Kelly froze in place, staring at the man. Did you talk to his wife?" "Yes, she confirmed that they are still together. He is unhappy in marriage, as is often the case in such cases, but he did not leave his family." Kelly shook her head, trying to process what she heard. "This is impossible. John never told me he had a family. He said he was divorced." "He lied, Kelly," Michael interrupted, his voice sharp but not aggressive. "And you should understand it too." Tears filled her eyes. Kelly felt cheated, confused, devastated. She wanted to deny it, but at the same time, she knew that Michael was serious. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "Because I wanted you to know the truth. I may not have been the best husband, but I never cheated on you. And I don't want anyone else to do that to you," he replied, his voice softer. Kelly collapsed into a chair, her hands pressed to her face. Michael leaned towards her. Kelly, I'm ready to forgive you everything and start with a clean slate. He left her alone to give her time to think things over, and she sat in silence, trying to collect the thoughts that were raging in her head like a storm. Kelly sat in silence, trying to take in what Michael had told her. Emotions raged in her head. Anger, disappointment, pain. She needed an answer, so she decided to call John and hear the truth directly from him. She dialed his number, but the receiver sounded cold. The subscriber is out of range. Kelly tried to contact him again and again, but each time she heard the same thing, her anxiety only grew. Suddenly her phone rang. Alex's name flashed on the screen. Mom, do you know where John is? He asked as soon as she answered. No. And what happened? She asked, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over her. He is not in the apartment. He disappeared sometime last night, and I can't reach him. He's out of the zone. It doesn't look like him, Alex said, with a hint of worry in his voice. Kelly felt her heart sink. She tried to find some explanation, but Michael's words began to sound louder and louder in her head. He has a wife and 3 children. He lied to you all the time. Maybe he... She began, but stopped, not knowing what to say. Mom, do you know something? Alex asked, noticing her hesitation. No, I don't know anything, she answered, lowering her eyes, though her son could not see it. But maybe I know why he doesn't answer. Kelly put the phone down and felt a wave of despair wash over her. Everything Michael said now seemed true to her. John's absence and his silence only confirmed suspicions. He disappeared because he's afraid the truth will surface, she told herself quietly, clutching her arms to her chest. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. She felt cheated and broken. Everything she had believed so sincerely now seemed like an illusion. Kelly didn't try to call again. She decided for herself that Michael was right. John, the one she trusted, cheated on her. It's been a few days since Kelly learned the truth about John, or at least what Michael told her. She avoided any calls from him, dropping them as soon as she saw his number on the screen. Her disappointment and pain were too great for her to continue communicating. One evening, on her way home, Kelly was walking down the street, lost in her own thoughts. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Kelly, John called, catching up with her. She stopped, surprised and a little confused. She didn't want to talk to him, but he looked determined. Why don't you answer my calls? Why are you dropping them? John asked. Because I know everything about you, she answered coldly. What do you mean? He asked, raising his eyebrows in surprise. Kelly sighed, trying to control her emotions. I know you're married, you have 3 children, and you lied to me all this time. John looked shocked. Who told you that? He asked. Michael? She answered. And he even talked to your wife. She confirmed everything. John was silent for a moment. That's not true, Kelly, he said, handing her some paper. Kelly took it, although she was skeptical. She unfolded the paper and saw an official divorce certificate. The date on the document indicated that John had divorced 6 months ago. I've been divorced for a long time, Kelly, he explained. My divorce was difficult, and my ex-wife cannot accept it in any way. She still clings to our history and uses every opportunity to make my life difficult. If she told your husband that we're still together, that's just her trying to hurt me. Kelly stared at the document, unsure of what to say. Her heart was filled with mixed emotions: joy, doubt, guilt. I was sure you lied to me, she said. I couldn't lie to you, Kelly, John replied, touching her hand. You mean more to me than you think. She felt the warmth of his touch and realized that her resentment was beginning to melt away. I want to believe you, John, she said, looking into his eyes. But where have you been? Why did you suddenly disappear and I couldn't find you? John looked at her with a small smile. I wanted to surprise you. I went to the village to visit my childhood friend. I needed to borrow some money, he answered. Kelly looked at him in surprise. Money? Why? I needed to make a payment for the apartment I found for us. These words caught Kelly by surprise. She didn't know what to say and just looked at him in surprise. For us? Yes, for us, John confirmed, his voice soft but firm. I thought it was time to do something more serious. I wanted us to have a place where we could be together without worrying about anything. Kelly felt her heart skip a beat. This man who disappeared returned not only with an explanation, but also with a plan for their future. John, I love you so much, she said, looking into his eyes. And I love you. I don't want to lose you, Kelly. You are more than just a person who is close to me. You are the meaning of my life, he answered. Kelly was moved by his words. After talking with Michael, Kelly finally decided that she could no longer stay in a marriage that had long since lost any meaning. They filed for divorce. Michael took it with displeasure and did not hide his bitterness. Kelly moved into the apartment that John rented for them. It was a cozy place where she felt happy for the first time in a long time. Her days were now filled with the love and care that John surrounded her with. Their relationship grew stronger, and they made plans for the future. Alex, inspired by the example of his mother, also found his happiness. At work, he met a girl named Sarah who shared his interests and life values. Their relationship developed easily and naturally, and Alex felt that he had found the one with whom he wanted to spend the rest of his life. One evening, they all gathered together at Kelly and John's new apartment. The living room was filled with laughter, and the table was overflowing with delicious dishes. "I always wanted to see you happy, Mom," Alex said, raising his glass. "And I'm proud of you, son," Kelly replied with a smile as she looked over at Sarah, who was sitting next to Alex. John hugged Kelly and said softly, "We all deserve a second chance." Everyone was happy, full of hope and faith in a better future. Each of them now had what they had longed for: love, support, and peace. The story of Kelly and her family has ended, but each of them has begun a new chapter in their lives, a chapter full of happiness and harmony.